Imagine working in an office where one person thinks they run the place, even though they don't. Now, imagine that same person trying to sabotage your career, only to end up humiliated in the most delicious way possible. Well, that's exactly what happened to me, and trust me, you're going to love how this story ends. If you've ever had to deal with a toxic coworker who acted like they were the boss, hit that like button. And if you've ever wished karma would finally come for them, make sure to subscribe, because today's story is pure justice served cold and sweet. Years ago, I was hired as the head of accounting and payroll for a small but growing business. We weren't huge, just about 10 people in the office, a few more in the shop out back, and around 50 workers out in the field. On paper, my role was simple. Manage the company finances, make sure payroll went out on time, and keep everything compliant. I had 2 people reporting directly to me, so yes, I had responsibilities. But more importantly, I reported only to the owner himself. Enter Karen. No, that wasn't her real name, but if you've ever worked in an office, you probably already know the type. She was the receptionist. That's it. Answer phones, greet visitors, maybe make copies. But in her head, she was Queen Bee. She had worked with the owner since the beginning. And she wielded that fact like a sword. 2 minutes late, she'd give you the eyebrow raise and the dramatic watch tap. Need her to send out a package? If you weren't in her good graces, somehow it would take days. And if the owner asked her to tell me something, she'd strut into my office like she was a drill sergeant delivering orders. First, I tried to brush it off. But soon, most of us were just doing her tasks ourselves to avoid the friction. Now, the owner had this nice little habit. Whenever he went to Costco, he'd grab a big box of snacks, granola bars, candy bars, chips. He'd leave them in the break room for everyone to enjoy. A small but meaningful perk. The first time he brought in a big box of Snickers, Karen practically sprinted to the kitchen like it was Black Friday. As she passed my office, I noticed her trying to hide a stack of bars in her hands. I thought, that's odd. Later, one of the shop guys, let's call him Kevin, came in, and I told him to grab a Snickers on his way out. He just laughed. Does Karen know about them? If she does, there won't be any left. Turns out, every single time snacks came in, Karen raided the stash, hoarding candy bars in her desk drawer like a squirrel preparing for winter. Sure enough, when I went to the kitchen that day, out of an entire Costco-sized box of 30, only one lonely Snickers remained. Now, normally I'd roll my eyes and move on. It's just candy, right? Let her have her little sugar empire. But oh no, Karen wasn't done. Couple months later, the owner called me into his office. His tone was serious. He had just received a huge tax penalty notice in the mail. Instantly, my heart sank. This was my department. I handled all filings and payments. If I messed up, that was on me. But here's the twist. I had never even seen the notice. Turns out, Karen had opened my mail. A huge no-no, and instead of leaving it on my desk, she ran it straight to the owner, trying to make me look incompetent. For 15 terrifying minutes, I thought my career was about to implode. But after digging through files and calling the state assessor's office, we figured out the truth. The notice was a computer glitch sent to every business in the county. We were fine, paid, filed, compliant. Still, Karen had crossed the line. She tried to sabotage me, and that's when I thought, game on. A few weeks later, Karen was out running one of her errands for the owner. I saw him at her desk, rummaging for some paper clips. That's when opportunity struck. I offered to help him look. We opened drawer after drawer, until one stuck slightly. We pulled it open. Friends, it was like discovering a pirate's treasure chest. Stacked inside, neatly hoarded, were 35 to 40 candy bars, Snickers, Kit Kats, Twix, an entire stockpile stolen from the break room. The owner froze. For a moment, he didn't say a word. Then he quietly picked up every single bar, marched them into his office, and laid them across his desk. And then we waited. Karen returned later that afternoon. She set her purse down, took a seat, and absent-mindedly opened her drawer to grab one of her hidden treats. The moment was priceless. First, confusion, then dawning horror. Her face drained of color as she realized her stash was gone. That's when the owner stepped out of his office. Calmly, firmly, "Karen, can you come to my office for a moment?" She walked in like a defendant to trial. And there, spread across the desk like evidence at a crime scene, were all her stolen candy bars. The excuses tumbled out. She said she deserved a fair share because she worked harder than anyone else. She claimed it was only natural to set aside her portion. The owner wasn't having it. He gave her a formal reprimand and a strict order. From now on, she would wait at least a full day before touching any snacks. Everyone else got first pick. For the next 2 years I worked there, she was noticeably quieter, like a scolded puppy whenever new candy arrived. But here's the best part. The owner didn't just punish Karen. He took her entire candy hoard and handed it out to the shop guys in the back. The next day, Kevin walked in with a grin from ear to ear. He said, "Man, that was the sweetest Snickers I've ever eaten." And I have to agree. Sometimes revenge doesn't need to be loud or cruel. Sometimes it just needs to be poetic. In the end, Karen didn't lose her job, but she did lose her throne. And honestly, that was enough. Because respect isn't something you steal, it's something you earn. And no amount of candy bars will change that. You walk into work on a Monday morning already carrying the usual stress of payroll deadlines and tax filings. And before you can even set your bag down, someone gives you the side eye because you were, wait for it, 2 minutes late. That was my daily reality. And the person behind that judgmental glare? Our receptionist. Let's call her Karen. She wasn't the boss. She wasn't a manager. Heck, her actual job description was about as simple as it gets. Answer phones, greet clients, maybe pick up office supplies now and then. But in her mind, she was untouchable. Royalty. The queen bee of the office hive. Why? Because she'd been with the owner since the beginning. And she made sure everyone knew it. Our office wasn't glamorous. Just a cluster of beige cubicles, the faint hum of fluorescent lights, and the constant shuffle of paperwork. Out back, you'd hear the clang of tools from the shop. But in the middle of it all sat Karen, perched behind the reception desk like a gatekeeper to the kingdom. And she used that position as a throne. If you were 2 minutes late, she'd lift her wrist like she was Big Ben itself and tap her watch dramatically. If the owner needed me to do something, she wouldn't just pass the message. She'd march into my office with a smirk, deliver the order, and then linger, as if waiting for me to salute. And God help you if you needed her to do her actual job. Packages suddenly took forever. Appointment scheduling mysteriously got backed up. It was like everything came with a hidden toll, and the toll was being in Karen's good graces. Most of us learned quickly. It was easier to just do her tasks ourselves than risk the drama. But here's where things get almost comical. The owner, bless him, was a generous guy. Whenever he made a Costco run, he'd pick up snacks for the office, granola bars, chips, candy bars. He'd leave the box in the break room as a little perk. Nothing fancy, just a small gesture of kindness. One day he brought in a massive box of Snickers. And I kid you not, Karen bolted from her desk like a sprinter out of the starting blocks. I watched her bounce past my office, both hands cradling a bundle of candy bars like she just robbed a convenience store. Later that day, I told one of the shop guys, Kevin, to grab a Snickers on his way out. He chuckled and said, "Does Karen know about them? If she does, there won't be any left." I laughed, thinking he was joking. But when I walked into the kitchen, sure enough, an entire box of 30 Snickers had been reduced to one. A single bar. That's when Kevin let me in on the office's open secret. Every time snacks came in, Karen raided the stash, hoarding candy in her desk like some sugar-obsessed dragon guarding treasure. At the time, I just shook my head. Annoying? Yes. Worth making a scene over? Not really. Figured. Fine. Let her have her little hoard. Who cares? Oh, how wrong I was. Fast forward a couple of months. I get called into the owner's office. He's holding a letter, his expression grim. It was a huge tax penalty notice. My heart stopped. This was my department. If I'd messed up filings, that was catastrophic. Not just for the business, but for my reputation. The kicker? I had never even seen the letter. The truth came out fast. Karen had opened my mail. She had no business touching it, but she had. And when she saw the penalty notice, she didn't put it back on my desk like she was supposed to. Instead, she ran it straight to the owner, hoping to throw me under the bus. For 15 terrifying minutes, I scrambled through files, stomach churning, palms sweating, until I confirmed the truth. The notice was a mistake. The state had glitched and sent out penalty letters to everyone. We had paid everything. We were fine. But Karen didn't care about the truth. She cared about one thing, making me look bad. That was the breaking point. The candy hoarding? Whatever. But trying to sabotage my career? That was war. And fate was about to hand me the perfect weapon. A few weeks later, the moment I'd been waiting for practically fell into my lap. Karen was out running one of her special errands for the owner, probably picking up his dry cleaning or grabbing a latte for his wife. Something trivial that she insisted made her indispensable. While she was gone, I noticed the owner at her desk, rifling through drawers. He muttered something about needing paper clips. And then it hit me. This was my chance. I casually strolled over, pretending to help. Drawer after drawer, pens, sticky notes, envelopes. Nothing special. And then, one drawer stuck slightly, as if it had been overstuffed. The owner tugged it open. What we found inside made both of us freeze. It was like opening a treasure chest. Row after row of shiny candy wrappers, stacked neatly, glinting under the fluorescent lights. Kit Kats, Twix, Snickers, enough to fuel a small army. Easily 35 to 40 candy bars, all hoarded from the office stash over the past few months. For a long moment, the office was dead silent. Just the hum of the lights, the distant clank from the shop out back, and both of us staring at the sugar stockpile. The owner slowly straightened up, his jaw tightening. He didn't even need to say anything. We both knew what this meant. Without a word, he gathered every single candy bar into his arms, carried them into his office, and spread them across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. And then we waited. When Karen finally returned, she waltzed in like always, humming to herself, shopping bag in hand. She set her things down, slid into her chair, and absent-mindedly pulled open her drawer, no doubt reaching for her little reward snack. What happened next was pure theater. First, her brow furrowed in confusion. She blinked, looked again. Her hands patted through the drawer like maybe the candy had just vanished. Then realization hit. Her face drained of color. Panic flickered in her eyes. And right on cue, the owner stepped out of his office. Calm. Serious. Karen, can you come into my office for a moment? I swear. She walked in like a defendant being led to trial. And there, laid out on the desk in neat rows, were the stolen candy bars. The look on her face? Priceless. She stammered. She tried to explain. Well, I work harder than anyone else around here. I thought I deserved my share. She even used the word owed, as if candy bars were some sort of workplace tax refund. The owner wasn't buying it. His voice was low, measured, the kind of tone that cuts deeper than yelling. These were for everyone, not just you. Do you realize how unfair this is to the rest of the team? Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. She had no comeback. That day, she walked out of his office with a formal reprimand and a brand new rule. From now on, if the owner brought in snacks, Karen had to wait at least a full day before touching them. Everyone else got first pick. Her reign of snack tyranny was over. But oh, my friends, it didn't end there. The owner didn't just confiscate the candy. He made a point. He carried the entire stash, the treasure trove of stolen sweets, out to the shop in the back. The guys who worked with grease-stained hands and sweat-soaked shirts every day. The ones Karen looked down on as beneath her. He handed out the candy bars to each of them with a grin. The next day, Kevin, the shop guy, walked into my office with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. He held up a Snickers bar like it was gold. Man, he said, unwrapping it slowly, savoring the bite. This is the sweetest candy bar I've ever eaten. And I couldn't help but laugh. Because he was right. It wasn't just sugar. It was justice. Karen wasn't fired. She wasn't demoted. But from that day forward, she wasn't the queen bee anymore. Her throne had been toppled, her power stripped away, her candy empire dissolved. Whenever a new box of snacks arrived, she sat quietly at her desk, glancing nervously toward the break room, waiting until the next day to even dare walk in. And every time, I'd watch her with the same thought running through my head. Sometimes karma doesn't need to be cruel. Sometimes it just needs to be poetic. In the end, Karen tried to sabotage me with a letter that could have cost me my job. But in the grand scheme of things, all it took to expose her was the very thing she valued most, her stash of stolen candy bars. And you know what? Justice doesn't always look like firing or revenge plots. Sometimes it looks like a box of Snickers, handed out to the people who actually deserve them. To really understand why this whole candy saga mattered so much, you have to picture what it was like working with Karen on a daily basis. Imagine trying to start your morning, coffee in hand, juggling mental notes about payroll numbers, only to have someone glance at the clock and loudly clear their throat. That was Karen's specialty. Tiny daggers disguised as quirks. If you answered the phone too slowly, she'd sigh dramatically, then re-answer on another line as if you'd just failed the company. If you asked her to order basic supplies, like printer ink, she'd smirk. "Oh, well, I'll see if I can fit that in. I'm really busy today." Busy doing what? Chatting with her sister on the phone about hair appointments? Sorting her nail polish at her desk? And when she walked through the office, she had this little strut. Shoulders back, nose slightly lifted. Like she owned not just the reception desk, but every paycheck, every stapler, every breath of air in that building. Most days I tried to bite my tongue. But let me tell you, it ate at me. Because it wasn't just about candy bars or late packages. It was the principle, the constant feeling that she was above us, that she could pull the rug out from under me or anyone at any moment. I'd sit at my desk sometimes, staring at spreadsheets, trying to focus on numbers, but in the back of my mind I'd hear her voice. Don't forget the owner wanted that immediately. Or the way she'd lean against my doorframe, arms crossed, lips curled into that smug little half-smile, like she was checking whether I'd flinch. And that day with the tax notice, for those 15 minutes before I found the truth, my stomach was in knots. My mind raced. What if the owner doesn't believe me? What if this ruins everything? What if Karen finally gets what she's been after? My credibility. I remember staring at my hands on the desk. They were trembling. My palms were slick with sweat. And I hated that she had made me feel that way. That's when I knew. The next time she slipped, I'd be ready. It wasn't long before more little moments kept adding fuel to the fire. One afternoon, one of my team members asked her if she could transfer a call to me. Simple request, right? Karen pressed the hold button, rolled her eyes so hard you could practically hear them click, and muttered, "Does anyone here even know how to do their own jobs?" Another time, she refused to give the shop guys their messages until the end of the day, just because they'd walked too loudly past her desk during lunch. And then there was the infamous stapler incident. One of the junior staff asked if she had a spare stapler they could borrow. She stared at them for a solid 3 seconds, then snapped, "This is my desk, not a supply closet." The irony? She had 4 staplers in her drawer. 4. Petty, yes, but all of it added up. That's why the candy became more than just candy. It was a symbol, a physical manifestation of her greed, her entitlement, her need to control even the smallest joys in the office. Everyone else saw those snacks as a treat, a tiny break in the day. But to Karen, they were another tool, another way to hoard power, one Snickers bar at a time. And when she tried to weaponize my own job against me with that tax notice, the balance tipped. Suddenly, those candy bars weren't just sugar. They were leverage, and I was going to use them. So when the owner and I opened that drawer and saw the treasure trove of chocolate, time slowed down. I swear, in that instant, I heard a little triumphant drum roll in my head. The universe had finally handed me the smoking gun. The wrappers gleamed under the overhead light, lined up like guilty soldiers awaiting trial. I glanced at the owner. His eyes narrowed, his lips pressed tight. He didn't explode. He didn't shout. But the silence said everything. We were both thinking the same thing. She's done. After we gathered the candy bars from Karen's desk and laid them out neatly across the owner's desk, the office felt different. The usual hum of the fluorescent lights seemed louder. The clock ticked slower. Even the sound of typing from the cubicles carried a nervous edge, like everyone could feel something was about to happen, even if they didn't know what. I sat in my office, pretending to work, but my heart was thumping. My hands itched with anticipation. For months, Karen had strutted around like she owned us. For months, she drained the joy out of small things, poisoned the air with her smugness. And now, finally, the trap was set. The door opened. Karen breezed in, humming to herself, shopping bag swinging at her side. She tossed her keys onto the desk with her usual dramatic flair, took off her jacket, and sank into her chair. Then, almost on autopilot, she pulled open her drawer. I swear, watching her was like watching a play in slow motion. Her eyes flicked down. Her hand froze. Her brows knit together. She leaned closer, rummaged, then rummaged harder. Her lips parted, confusion flashing into panic. She looked up, scanning the room, as if someone might have magically returned the candy while she wasn't looking. Her face paled, and right on cue, the owner stepped out of his office. "Karen," he said in that low, steady voice, "can you come in here for a moment?" She walked in slowly, almost stiff, like her legs weren't working properly. And there, spread across the owner's desk, was her entire hoard of candy bars, lined up like evidence in a courtroom. Her jaw dropped. Her eyes darted between the candy and the owner, then to me, standing in the doorway. The silence stretched so long you could hear the buzzing of the lights overhead. Finally, the owner spoke. His tone was calm, but sharp as a blade. "Karen, do you want to explain this?" Her lips moved, but no words came out at first. Then, in a small, defensive voice, "Well, I just thought, I work harder than anyone else around here. I figured I was owed my share." "Owed?" the owner repeated, leaning forward. His eyes narrowed. "Karen, these snacks are for everyone. You've been taking them all for yourself." She crossed her arms, clinging to the last shred of bravado. "It's not like anyone else appreciates them the way I do. People waste them. I was just being smart." "Smart?" The owner's voice dropped an octave. "You've been stealing from the team. Do you know how unfair this is to everyone else?" For once, Karen had no comeback. Her face flushed red, then drained pale. She looked like a balloon losing air. The owner leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Here's what's going to happen. You're getting a formal reprimand. And from now on, if I bring in snacks, you are not to touch them until at least the next day. Everyone else gets first pick. Do you understand?" Karen's shoulders sagged. She nodded, eyes cast downward. The queen bee was dethroned. But the best part wasn't the reprimand. It was what happened next. The owner gathered every candy bar from his desk, stood up, and walked out to the shop in the back. I followed him just to watch. The shop guys looked up, surprised, as he held out the stash like Santa Claus on Christmas morning. "Here," he said with a grin. "Looks like these belong to you guys." Laughter filled the shop. Grease-stained hands eagerly reached for Snickers and Twix. One guy tossed a Kit Kat to another across the room like a football. Another unwrapped a bar and bit into it with exaggerated satisfaction. The air out there felt lighter, warmer, filled with camaraderie. The next day, Kevin walked into my office holding a Snickers. He unwrapped it slowly, deliberately, and said with a grin, "Man, this is the sweetest candy bar I've ever eaten." And I swear, in that moment, I tasted the sweetness too. Not of chocolate, but of justice. Karen didn't quit. She didn't get fired. But something in her broke that day. She came into work quieter, less smug. The strut was gone. The watch tapping stopped. When new boxes of snacks arrived, she sat at her desk, staring at them from afar like a scolded child. She waited. Sometimes she didn't even take one. It was like watching a once proud cat walk around with its tail between its legs. And every time I saw her glance nervously toward the break room, I remembered the look on her face when she saw her empty drawer. In the end, Karen didn't need to be fired. She didn't need to be humiliated publicly. The real punishment was losing her throne. Because in every toxic workplace, there's always that one person who feeds on control, on attention, on fear. And when you take that away from them, even with something as small as a box of candy bars, they're left with nothing. Respect can't be stolen. It has to be earned. And Karen? She never earned it. If this story gave you chills, or maybe even made you smile, smash that like button and tell me in the comments. What's the pettiest, most satisfying revenge you've ever seen at work? And of course, don't forget to subscribe. Because trust me, there are plenty more stories where this one came from.